backup channel going in just a few seconds, ladies and gentlemen, and then we'll be going live with Billy Te Kahika. There we go. And we are ready. So, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Vinny Eastwood Show. I am not a credible journalist. I'm an incredible journalist. And my very special guest is Billy Te Kahika, coming to us live from a very nice, noisy cafe. Billy, good morning. Afternoon, in fact. And today we've had some news to announce that the election's been delayed and the lockdowns have been extended and a number of other big issues for people. So, Billy, could you give people a bit of a rundown of what you've been up to in this last very, very busy week?
Yeah, well, sure. So, obviously, the first thing that came up was that
we're having some connection difficulties with Billy here. Sorry, we're not getting anything, Billy. I'm gonna have to drop your Skype.
Sorry.
We didn't get any of that actually. That was all garbled up. You might have to try that one again, or perhaps move to a location with a better signal.
Yeah, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use my personal router. Just stand by on that.
Okay, no problem.
Just change over. Just give me a sec. Yeah, okay. I think. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I'm just going to change my router. What's happening across New Zealand because of the lockdowns, the amount of data bandwidth that's being used is just amazing. So we're having real trouble doing broadcasts and doing all sorts of sort of information transmission between our own team members. How's that working?
Yeah, it's working a little bit better.
Okay, I'm just going to go to my own portable one. Just excuse me a second.
The problems of live radio, ladies and gentlemen, it can be a difficult one. It seemed to have.
Okay, how's that?
Much better. All right. Well, one thing you've got to do is maybe turn off your camera and then turn it back on again. That should refresh it, and then just by clicking the little camera button.
Okay, right. The little camera. Get it off.
And then on again.
No. And then on again.
All right, that's better. Okay, Billy. Yep, and your head's a little bit low in the frame, so maybe tilt that camera up a little bit.
How's that? Is that all right like that?
Much better. So sorry about all this technical issues, ladies and gentlemen. It's a lockdown. We can't manufacture everything. All right, so Billy, without further ado, take it away and let us know what you've been up to this week.
Yeah, sure, guys. You know, technology is great when it works for you, but not so good when it doesn't. Okay, so we've been responding hardcore since the lockdown was announced last week. As you know, Vinny, we said that was going to happen the second week of August, about a month or so ago, and that's indeed happened. Additionally to that, we said also that operations have been militarised. They certainly have. We have military now involved in checkpoints and across New Zealand. We also have other information that's been leaked to us. As you know, Vinny, that says that military staff are going to be used for door-to-door tasks, door-to-door information gathering, which would include testing. And now the elections have been delayed 1 month, which I think is terrible. I mean, really, if you think about it, you know, a party like us, we should be saying, hey, this is great, let's extend it out another month. But actually, we see it the other way. We actually see that it's just another month for this government to destroy even more of our country, to put more of their plans into implementation, and you know, destroy more lives really. So that's where our concern is. Both Chamberlain Ross and I we're advocating and hoping that the elections wouldn't be delayed, but they have been. And so what we now need to do, we need to watch this government very, very quickly. If they get into a position where they're going to ask people to do mail-in voting and online voting, we all know that we're in serious trouble.
Do you think that's what's planned, do you? Because I see this as kind of like a blessing and a curse because of the amount of heat that's being generated on the government because of the lockdowns and the amount of attention that's coming towards our party because of our stance on it, which nobody else has really taken.
Yeah, Yeah, that's right. So it's a curse on one side, it's a blessing on another, then back to being a curse and a blessing again. But whenever the democracy is withheld from the people, that's an issue. And really, if they weren't intending to impose different types of voting processes, then why would you do a lockdown? They say it's because of the whole testing regime and the whole process that they're following through in the management of this crisis. But we feel that there could have been ways to have implemented a safe and secure vote on election day, but they've decided no, they're pushing it out a month. And I had someone ask me yesterday, why would some of these politicians want to see extended a month? And I jokingly said, and it went viral with this guy, I said it's because the parliamentarians that know that the MPs that know they're going to lose their jobs want an extra month of pay.
Well, let's think about the documents that we've been talking about recently. I'm not sure if you can actually see this on the screen. Yep. Would you be able to read this out and maybe give a bit of commentary for it? The people in the audience won't be able to see it, so you're going to have to read it and give some context for this.
Okay, they can't see this document, Vinny?
I can make them see it. Here we are.
Oh, okay. All right. So if you go to page 4, so okay.
I've only got screenshots here open.
All right. Well, we'll start with this one. Okay. So planning guidance, likely tasks. Now, this document that the public are seeing here is a document that was released to me by a current serving member of the Defence Force. He's a reasonably ranking member of the Defence Force that sent me a restricted document. It's restricted status. It's a CDF, Chief of Defence Force, issued letter, and basically it's an order. It's an order of operations, and it's got the list of tasks of how the military can be deployed to support the management of COVID-19 on behalf of the government. These likely tasks include staff support for OGAs, provision of isolation, quarantine, movement control. So likely in conjunction with NZPOL, please. So what that means there is that we know already that the Air Force Security Military Police are being used to manage the quarantine detention. So that's proven. Assistance to the New Zealand Police for enforcement duty. Again, I said that this was going to happen when it was first announced that Commodore Webb would be taking over the operational management of quarantine and detention. This exactly is what I said would happen, and people said, no, you can't.
There's a little bit of scratching on your microphone there.
Oh, yeah, okay, get rid of that. We said this, Vinny, and here's the documentation. I wish people could see all of this. So what you see is New Zealand Police, they'll be assistants to New Zealand Police for enforcement. Now, enforcement is a very, very broad term that they're using there, enforcement duties. And, what does it mean? Where does it end? And I would suggest to you that would also include needing to go onto people's properties to, again, assist in testing and or removal of people for testing from their homes. Assistance with border security operations, we know about that. Logistics support, including transport of stores and or personnel and catering. So below that, you've got provisions of accommodation. So it's army tentage, pastoral care, looking after people, medical support, same thing again, mortuary affairs to handle the housing and the transport of bodies, and assistance to the Department of Corrections. Now, that's a pretty standard one, that one. When I joined the Army, at that time, we're going back 20 years ago, New Zealand Defence Force staff were being used for prison security roles due to a strike with the prison guards at the time. So that's quite, I'm not worried about that at all. But if you had a screenshot of the next few pages, it also talks about door-to-door knocking and information gathering as well, which is, this is serious stuff. Here we go. That's it. So that's page 4 of this document, clause 6. So that's the extension of this current document here, because it stops on level 5. Clause 5. And it says there, no, you lost it.
Oh, sorry.
We've lost it.
One second.
Yep.
Double click there. Yeah, there we go. Okay, cool.
Okay, so assistance to fire and emergency services, that's cool. but assistance here for door knocking, public information tasks, and a range of security-related support. So that's where it gets very, very, very vague and ambiguous, and that's when you got to really start asking some really serious questions.
That's why, personally, upon reading the documents and all of that kind of stuff, as somebody who's not got operational experience in these matters, it just seemed like a bunch of very vague blah blah blah, and that to me is really, really terrifying when you're talking about military operations, because it means that they're keeping the specifics from their own people.
Yeah, well, that can be, those orders are so broad, they can be interpreted, because what happens after that, you have O groups, which are, which are meetings with either the platoon commander, the section commander, and he explains the interpretation of what those orders mean. And, so really, you could drive a bus in between the potential interpretation of these orders.
What would you say some of the people are saying that we're under effective martial law, de facto martial law already?
Well, again, I think if you break it down and you're in a position where military can be used to enforce anything that is on a civilian population, that is military law. In my view, people can argue with me any way they want, but when you've got military being used to enforce, used to gather information, force information out of people, require them to accompany them in the form of arrest to detention centres, that's, I'm sorry, that's, in my view, military law.
Now, and we've also had information coming in from people who are trapped at the Holiday Inn at the moment, and the people who are coming and transporting them from the buses from the airports to the Holiday Inn were being basically trying to separate them from their children, but they said no, and subsequently they got a ring from the New Zealand Defence Force, who didn't actually identify himself firstly as from the New Zealand Defence Force. He basically said he was the manager of the Holiday Inn. So that means that these quarantine facilities are actually being managed by the Defence Force. And there's a lot of fear out there that people are going to have their kids taken off them during this quarantine. And Ashley Bloomfield was saying on a video that I saw this morning as well, talking about that, how it might be the best thing to do to separate children from their families and things of that nature. So it's a big fear and a big concern for people at the moment, Billy.
Well, dead right. So number one, let's change that term quarantine and use it and replace it with the term detention, because that's what it is. I think what we're seeing in terms of that is just simply disgusting. It's a denial of the Bill of Rights, New Zealand Bill of Rights. It's a denial of basic decency, and this is where this government is taking us. It's just terrible.
It's internment, isn't it?
It certainly is, and that's why we're using the term detention now instead of quarantine, because that's what it is. And just so military personnel are being used to manage these facilities. The actual managers of the accommodation areas themselves are actually put on the side. All they do is make sure that the food is flowing, the lights are turned on, but it is military personnel that are managing these detention centres. Again, ask yourself, if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, talks like a duck, it's a duck, and that's military. That's military authority being imposed, and that's on a civilian population. Therefore, it's military law.
Now, new articles have been coming out from the newsroom today talking about quote-unquote inoculation, and they're not talking about physical inoculation of people, they're talking about psychological inoculation, as in this is the kind of conspiracy theories that you could be hearing about COVID-19 or such and blah, blah, blah. And you were talking about some school that was starting some course on conspiracy theorists for their children. Could you explain that?
Yeah, exactly. So a father from North Canterbury got in touch with me late yesterday afternoon to say that he was furious. His child had been given a COVID-19 protective mask to wear without he or his wife being notified or asked if that was fine. And the child wore it for the last half of the day, and that's a fact. And secondly, his daughter at the school down the road at the high school is like attending classes on conspiracy theories next week. So what we say to people is, look, we're not fear-mongering, we're asking questions. So people that say that we're fear-mongering, no, the fear-mongering is coming from this thinking government who are just out of control. We're now they're saying that anyone that asks questions and that is a critical thinker is denigrated to being a conspiracy theorist, which is complete rubbish. Back in the day, if you were a critical thinker, you were valued, you were respected in the community, but now all of a sudden, if you do that, you're considered a conspiracy theorist. But we're not falling for it. There are lots and lots and lots and lots of awake people out there that are tuning into what we're saying. They know that we're logical and sensible. We are working with world-class and world-renowned experts on our stance around COVID-19 medical procedure and management, and we can't be denied. This is the fact that we're using. We've got science, and what the facts and the science is telling us is that there's problems with the PCR test, and also that the lethality of the disease is well understood now on a global basis, that it's not lethal, and this government is still acting as if the original diagnosis of lethality for the disease is the same as it was when we first started, and it's not, and it's well understood that it's not. Now, that's not to say that if you're an elderly person and if you're unwell and have comorbidity in if you're sick, if you've got a lung problem, you need to be careful with anything. If you're going to catch pneumonia, if you're going to catch any of the respiratory diseases, you need to be very careful. Let's be smart. Our community health and safety is number one here. So that's another myth I'd like to blow. We are all about health and safety, but how can we guarantee that if the government is using faulty testing equipment? How can we guarantee that when the government is overreaching using out-of-date data? When the Prime Minister first said this, we would expect between 8,000 and 25,000 deaths from COVID. We've had 26.
That's nowhere near it. John Rappaport on the show yesterday, well-known journalist, he has said that the COVID-19 lockdowns are an attempt to destroy the economy specifically, and that economies have been destroyed in the past deliberately, and that way when everybody runs out of their money and gets out of their businesses, they have to sell it for pennies on the dollar to the wealthy magnates that are left, essentially. Could you speak to that issue? Because he also enlighten me as to the reason why this tech set up with the COVID-19 tracing cards, the 5G tracking technology, and these various other apparatus of AI are all being implemented simultaneously. He says that the New World Order is actually that technological grid. That's the New World Order, and once that grid is up, there won't be anything we can do.
Yeah, dead right. So, I mean, for me, the greatest concern is around the general consequences of an economic lockdown is the way that they're handling this crisis. And what I'm really committed to is examining the actual cost to people, to their businesses, to their lives, both from a financial point of view, social harm, mental harm, spiritual harm, any of that type of harm. And these are the sorts of things that we need to really look into, and they're not thinking things through. They're using out-of-date information and data, and they're standing there, trying to look serious and have people take them seriously. But we know that the science doesn't lie. True science and factual science that's out now that cannot be gainsaid is proving that what they're doing at best is totally misguidance, misinformation, and at the other end, it's treasonous because it is destroying our country. And what happens is that our economy will need to borrow more money. And if we can't pay it back, what does that mean to our national sovereignty? And so I would say that if we get into government, we are going to set up a People's Commission to investigate all of this. And I tell you, if we find out what we think we're going to find out, heads will roll, people should be imprisoned.
How exactly are we going to enforce that, though? Because I've been speaking to a number of other people in terms of the technical aspects of enforcement. We're living under a false corporate dictatorship, the Queen and Right of New Zealand, the original sovereign state that we were in 1835, October the 25th, I believe, was the Whakaputenga United Tribes flag, and that is technically still the jurisdiction. That is the flag that flies on the top of the Waitangi, the top marae, and at the moment we are operating under a false jurisdiction and a criminal cabal corporation. So that means that if we are to rely on any of the enforcement mechanisms of that false criminal cabal, I don't think they're going to hang themselves.
No, I think you're right, but that's the very stance that we've taken from day one with this party, with this movement, is that a proper People's Constitution and New Zealand Bill of Rights needs to be written so that citizens are protected against rogue governments. And what I would advocate is that really you've got to start with the framework, and that includes fixing the constitutional lackings within the system, and then setting up so that people who do act in a proven treasonous way that have caused great harm to New Zealand do get tried and answered to charges, and then are found guilty, prosecuted. And that's the way to do it. Vinny, what we need to do is make sure that people understand that the only way that we're going to fix these things so that true people's protection is in place in this government is to fix it up from the inside, fix up the lack of constitutional protection, because if we don't do that, it'll never get fixed. And this is one of the things that distantiates us from the other parties, and the other parties, the minor parties, have not realised any of this, and I know I say it again and again, at the level and the lack of savvy of these other parties, and I had another conversation the other day with another leader of a party, and they're just nowhere near understanding this. They're going on and talking about looking after families and that's completely what we stand for. It's in our range of policies that we've got and that we stand for. But right now, if we don't get in there to protect democracy and to actually construct a proper New Zealand Bill of Rights that cannot be overrun by Section 4 as it currently stands, and also fix up the constitutional framework that isn't set up to protect us. Unless we do that, then we've got nothing. And that way we can then look at those documents, Whakaputenga, and actually enshrine the treaty covenant as well into the framework, because it sits outside of that. So, we actually need to be pragmatic and get in there and fix that up so that we can investigate and then, if required, charge and then prosecute people that have caused so much harm to our country.
And it'll be quite a long list, I imagine, because we're talking about the heads of almost every bureaucratic institution that we have a name for in this country has been involved over a long period of time of preventing real justice from prevailing in this country. And a lot of people are only just waking up to this now. I've been doing this for 12 years, interviewing people like Vince, who's been a court watchdog, and the amount of things that he's seen, it's like Alice in Wonderland out there in New Zealand courts. That, to me, speaks of a real crisis of confidence within the system itself, because when we're talking about how you're going to enforce these laws, how you're going to enforce these changes, if the entire system itself is corrupt, and if you become Prime Minister, Billy, and you walk in there and somebody from the Treasury says, "Congratulations, Mr. Prime Minister, but unfortunately, if you keep any of your election promises, we're going to collapse the economy, and we'll blame you," and then the public will call for your head to be taken off. That's what I'm talking about, just in terms of the technical issues that we're dealing with. And I've been telling people on the streams that this is going to get a lot uglier before it gets better.
Oh, you did right. I mean, exactly what you're talking about there is, exactly the point, and that's part of actually going into the monetary system and the terms around our debt that we have. I mean, as you know, Vinny, fractional reserve banking, fiat money systems, quantitative easing, all those sorts of things which are at the base, fraudulent. We need to get in there and really fix up. I mean, I would have no problem in turning around and saying to the people that have lent us money, and say, right, guys, on what basis have you loaned New Zealand this money? And if it's based on the fractional reserve system, we're going to have a very, very, very serious conversation with those people, because, as you know, the intrinsic value of the principal debt is not actually what they lend out. I'll clarify what I mean by that. Just always remember, in historical fractional reserve banking loan systems, they only need 10% of the value in their vault that they lend out. So that means, they lend out $100 million. They only need 10% of that in reality in their vault. So they're actually digitising and printing money that has no value to it, and yet they're hanging us out to dry. And they just do that by the flick of a button. And we need to get onto that. And that's why I've got great concerns with the type of debt that we're going into. We need to find out actually who we are in debt with. I believe it's probably going to be the World Bank and IMF. And we need to find out what those terms are.
What collateral have we put up for that? Because I recall many years ago, I think Brazil wanted to get $1 billion out of the IMF, and they gave them the entire Amazon basin as security, and of course they couldn't pay the debt, and now the Amazon basin belongs to the IMF.
Yeah, that wouldn't be. I mean, it's what happened in Bolivia in the 90s with the water revolution that happened there, where the IMF and World Bank got them into such debt that they sold their water rights to another party that the World Bank brokered, and hey presto, next minute the Bolivians had to have a civil war to get their water rights back because they couldn't afford to buy their own water. So that's been done time and again. And what I'm seeing right now, when you have the president of Belarus who blew the lid on being tried to be bribed about 6 weeks ago, he was approached by IMF, who offered him $90 million to lock his country down along the line of the COVID-19 narrative. He refused. They came back and offered him $960 million. He still refused, and he issued a press release that went global, telling the world that IMF and World Bank are trying to do this to him to lock his country down. He said no. He's just had an election, and he won by a landslide in Belarus. And this is the type of the integrity and backbone that we've got to see in our government here to rescue our country, because these people that are in there today, I've got very, very serious questions about the integrity, especially when you cannot trust the base information that they're using for the COVID-19 crisis management. But it's just a huge tragic chain.
That's right. And when we think about this as well, there are a lot of people out there, myself and my wife included, who are feeling a significant amount of anxiety just because they're locked down, even if they don't have any financial worries as a result of it, and I'm just worried about the amount of suicides that are out there, and the amount of people who are going to be getting into fights or turning to heavy drinking or something like that, because there's nothing left. Like, they've destroyed the economy, they've destroyed my business, my family's now breaking apart as a result of how people can get when the idea of the very near future keeps replaying in their head to the point where it drives them insane, like feedback through a speaker.
Yeah, dead right, Vinny. I'm definitely worried about that. I truly am. I mean, number one, I'm a Christian first before I'm anything. I'm a family man. I've got a beautiful wife. I've got 6 kids and 2 grandchildren, and I'm concerned for them. And I had a letter, an email message passed on to me yesterday from a whānau that have reached out, and they've said that they're already discussing as a family at mum and dad level that if anyone's going to force any type of testing or vaccination on them, they're going to commit suicide as a family, and that deeply disturbs me. And these are the things I'm trying to tell people, is that we've had 1,800 cases thereabouts during the last lockdown. We had 26 deaths, which shows that it's a very, very, very incredibly low death rate in this particular disease. But yet the other deaths that are occurring at the hands of it, is deeply disturbing. I mean, I haven't got the numbers of it right now, but I do know that hundreds of people died during the lockdown period, and many of them in lonely situations, and that itself is another discussion. But I'm deeply concerned that people that are losing their livelihoods, their businesses, are going to take these type of steps. So what I've been doing in my live broadcasts, I've been promoting the suicide helpline to people, and I even gave out my number on my broadcast yesterday, and I've been slammed by people ringing me and texting me, sending me messages and concerns. So I was up till late last night ringing people up just to give them encouragement, to let them know that there are people that care very deeply for their well-being. A lot of them are in my Advanced New Zealand team. We all care, and we're all available to talk to people. But, we're concerned definitely by that, and this government isn't even talking about it.
I think it's like, what do we do? People are worried about where the rubber meets the road. I mean, like, let's say a soldier. I've been thinking about this in my head, Billy. I'm freaking out maybe a little bit over this, because I don't know how to fight. I don't got no weapons and things of that nature. I know people who are real men who won't actually allow somebody to come on their property and force vaccinate their children, who will use the defensive use of force if necessary. Right? These people in the government, they're trying to start a civil war here, and if they I'm starting to think that might be the case at any rate, because that's how communism works. You demoralize the population, you get them all freaking out and suspicious of each other, you get them to start a war with each other, and then you, the communists, can roll in with your tanks and everything and normalize the situation and make everybody happy, being that there's now peace again because of the wars that they started between us.
Exactly, and that's that is 101 communism and totalitarian authoritarianism. That's how they operate. It's well proven and documented. That's how they've done it throughout history. First of all, they take the weapons off the citizens, then they create the fear and distrust amongst the civilian population, then they create the violent unrest, and then they come in and lock it all down, and everybody surrenders their rights and freedoms for the idea of peace. I mean, as you know, that's classic Hegelianism and dialectic operations there. And in fact, I say, as I watch and observe the government, it's very, very clear, that they've got the Hegelian dialectic handbook out, and they're using it to do that. Even when you have people going into, garden centres to get equipment, and they haven't got a face mask, and they're walking in, and there's people sitting there with face masks on that won't serve them unless they had unless they went and got a face mask on, and because you haven't got the face mask on, you're the enemy. And so that's another division. This whole Black Lives Matters issue, which is completely a leftist tool to divide us and conquer us, is just nonsense. All lives matter. I don't know, in my circle of people, I don't know anyone that would hurt anyone because of race. I don't know anyone like that at all. And I'm sure, like you, Vinny, for me as well, I'd defend my Indian bro, I'd defend my Kazi brothers. I would, just if something was done wrong, there was injustice, I'd be the first to defend it. So all those are very much leftist techniques, and this government is setting up all of the frameworks to have that. And but I'm afraid that we Advanced New Zealand are completely awake to it. We will be saying the things and talking about it, so that these things come to light, and we're not going to allow people to divide us. I just did a rally about 25 minutes, it's 40 minutes ago. I finished the rally here in Central Whangarei. It was great. We had loads of people come out. I got to stand there and not get arrested and say my thing and talk about my candidacy for Te Tai Tokerau. And it was really quite weird. We had one strange lady come up to me, and she popped the finger at me and said that we called her pedophile. Never met the lady, never seen her before in my life, and she said we had called her a pedophile, and she walked off. Okay, then we had another guy say, yell out that he knows that this disease is the highest lethal disease ever. Number one, the first lady had issues, so that's fine, and the second guy thought he had a place to stand on. Now, I would defend both of them immediately to have that right to disagree with me, and that's democracy, and I really would. would. I would. If anyone was going to give someone grief at one of my events that disagreed with me, if anyone of my supporters, I'd be the first to defend the person in disagreement with me, because that's democracy. But what we're seeing with this government is they're setting up all the things to basically, if you say anything that they don't like and disagree with, you're gone. And I just spoke to someone before who's got a husband who's very high in TV in New Zealand, and they've been warned not to report anything that's anti the narrative. So there you go.
Well, it's just straight up like that, isn't it? And mental illness does exist, ladies and gentlemen. There's a lot of it. And according to, what was his name? Ed Dutton, who we had on the show earlier, there is actually a correlation between leftist thinking and ideology and mental illness. So, a lot of these things seem to have explained themselves all of a sudden, haven't they, ladies and gentlemen? Now, he also went on to say that if you have excess immigration into an area, that will create distrust between the people living in that area because they don't come from the same culture and that kind of thing. And again, we're being divided, and this makes us all the more easy to conquer. How do we come together? How do we express these things that we know to be true without being attacked? And the answer is, I don't know, because there's always going to be somebody out there, whether or not they're telling the truth and they really believe what they're saying, or whether they've just got a severe mental illness and they don't know what they're talking about. It's almost impossible to tell these days when you're looking at a comment section.
Well, yeah, I mean, you just got to respect people. Look, I get angry like anyone else. I get tired and stuff. This morning, we were dealing with a guy that was a volunteer for us, who's turned out not to be very, very well, and it's you get wound up and all that. And when you see people that disagree with you, sometimes you think to yourself, what planet are you on? You nuts. But at the end of the day, that's the price for freedom, and that's a price worth paying. And that's part of the whole thing that we stand on is freedom of speech. And now, when I say freedom of speech, I'm not talking about giving people the right to broadcast terrorism message, broadcast hate messages and things like that. That's or let's go kill somebody messages. Those things, are evident for themselves that we can't and they shouldn't be allowed to have airtime. But when you get into a position where it looks like the state media agency, i.e. TVNZ, has been told not to report on people with dissenting views around the narrative around COVID-19 or report anything negative about the government, then we've got serious problems, because that's how communist governments operate.
And 120 million people, I think, have lost their lives in the 20th century alone due to communism. And it's indeed the concept of collectivism versus individualism. Do you believe the individual is supreme, or do you believe that the collective is supreme and the individual doesn't matter and doesn't have any rights? That's the inherent and very clear biological difference, ladies and gentlemen. One exists, one doesn't exist, okay? What am I saying by the state doesn't exist? Can you touch the state? Can you wrap your arms around it? No, you can't, because it doesn't actually exist. It's an abstraction. Kind of like you can't touch a forest, but you can touch a tree. The individual is the only thing that really exists, and therefore it is the only thing that needs to be respected, because it is the only thing that actually matters. And if you adopt an ideology that is opposite to that, you're going to start to have a real problem with this thing that doesn't care what you think. It's called reality. Reality doesn't care what you believe either, right? And so as you go through this belief structure, you're going to start to try and convince yourself that what you're seeing is not what you're seeing, and that what people are saying is not what they're saying, and you're going to start to go mental, okay? Does that explain almost every conversation you've ever had with a severe leftist,
Well, yeah, it does really. I mean, we've got a couple of lefties that Māori lefties that are having a go at me. One's calling me a white supremacist, which is a real crack up. I've never met a Māori white supremacist before, so that's a new one. And the other one is claiming. What is he claiming? What's this other fool saying? just real lefty Labour supporters that are just having a go at me, and that's really fine. They're welcome to do that, but the leftist mindset is something that I don't understand. And as you say, collectivism, when it's allowed to be applied based on individual choice, there's no problem with that. I don't mind communities working together to get things done and all that, but that's not what they're talking about in the Agenda 21 2030 environment. It's collectivism, suddenly termed communitarianism, which is when at the expense of the individual things are done, and that's not what community is about. Community is about when all people come together as individuals to make something happen, and they push behind the same objective. But that's not what they're talking about from the leftist side. It's completely, if you don't agree with us, we shoot you, and we control you that way through fear and manipulation, and ultimately through state control. And that's what I fear, that if we as New Zealand don't stand up and protect our rights, that's where we could be heading.
Well, I think that is where we're heading, because that's what's planned to a large degree. What kind of new tactics are we going to be doing? Because you were talking about different forms of resistance to the lockdowns, that kind of thing, and I just wanted to run an idea past you. If we could do this as an experiment at some point during a live stream, is, let's say theoretically, here's Jacinda Ardern's office number, all right, and we give that out live on air, and we ask people to call that number now, and then all of a sudden that number's calling up with hundreds and hundreds of calls and things like that, and we keep calling them for an hour, right? Each and every individual gives them a call and expresses their disgust with this kind of thing. How quickly do you think it would be before the Prime Minister's office simply shut down those phone lines, and then if you go from that phone line to another and you actually start to leapfrog it, and before you know it, you could actually shut down every single voice that they've got, just by sheer will, just blocking their phone lines so that they can't get anything done without this thing ringing off the hook with people politely expressing their displeasure for these measures?
Yeah, I think peaceful civil protest is the way to go, and that's why I was very pleased in the little march we had last week here in Whangarei. We had the organisers did such a great job. They kept the numbers at just under 100. Many people tried to join us as we walked, but they were politely reminded that they needed to not walk with us, so that we kept under the 100-person limit. And it was peaceful, it was orderly, it was a good wairua, a good spirit in it. And that's the way it should be done. You remember last time that we did the do not consent letter, and we do need to update that and get that out again. And we got people to bombard Parliament. Jamie Lee Ross told me that we crashed the Beehive server, and he laughed because he was getting his own inbox was totally annihilated because all the MPs were getting the messages at once, and he had a laugh. He rang me up and said, "Oh, you mungle, you've just stuffed my entire email up for the day." And I sort of said, "Well, welcome to the movement, brother. This is what it's about." So it can be done. I think what we need to do is, as you say, think of innovative ways to make our point very clearly and peacefully, and so that this government knows that they're being watched. We've got concerns, we've got questions, and we don't like the way that they're doing things. So I think being innovative, and I'm certainly always open to ideas how we do that. I think phone calls, I think emails, I think also well-placed media ads, social media bombing, all that sort of thing. I think that helps, because what's happening, what we've seen, and we were talking about it during our executive party meeting, is that in the last week, Vinny, we've had well over 1 million people engage in us, and our Facebook reach now was greater than the Labour parties in the last week. Can you believe that?
Yeah, I saw the stats rising just before the lockdown. We were like about maybe 20% behind Labour's reach, and we've got maybe 10% of their followers at present. So
we've gone past
massive, and we've gone massive past that as well.
Yeah, that's right. So those figures came up. So what it means is that, as we deal with getting the message out, we can actually really start to stretch out and try new things, and to make this government know where we stand, and that we're not going to take what they're delivering without full explanations, transparency, and a good information base that they're making these decisions on. Because that's one of the issues that we're saying, is that they're making decisions, but they're not proving up the information to the public in a public way. And I would say that if they're going to destroy our rights and freedoms and our economy, they better be upfront with the information, and they're not. And Jerry Brownlee put his foot in it last week, and Judith as well, Collins, when they said that that they were trying to get information from the government and weren't getting it, and they made a big deal of it, and that just substantiated what we've been saying. But they're afraid to say that, so they unwittingly supported what we were saying, and
then got chastised for doing so in the media this morning.
That's exactly right. And you see, what's happening with us is that with the mainstream media, I'm getting phone calls from them. They're asking me for commentary, and they're getting very, very logical and responsible replies, which they don't know what to do with. I think they're expecting me to say, let's all dress up in purple and grab a pink umbrella and go for a run and we'll be right, sort of stuff. But they're getting very logical responses. They're getting proof source information and stuff like that. And, that really disarms all of that. But what's concerning really is the level of complicity and in the way that the state media is behaving towards, biased journalism. And that's got to be deeply concerning for all of us as New Zealanders, because, these people are destroying our country, and we need to know on what basis. And they are fair, reasonable, and logical questions to ask.
Is the use of force on the table? All right, because if they're coming into our houses and they're using force on us, and they're separating our families, and they're giving us forced medical procedures, I mean, it is the right of every sentient being to defend itself from attack.
Yeah, I've been hearing from lots of people saying that they're not gonna take it, and I'm concerned for that. Obviously, as a kid, look, I've grown up with violence in my life as a kid, not in my whānau, but certainly growing up in the streets of Auckland. And a teenager, when I did my community police volunteering, then going into the army, learning how to be a soldier, and then after that, in a short stint in the police, and that, I'm no stranger to violence. And being a musician, I've seen and been involved with hundreds of bar fights. But, I'm completely dedicated to peace, rangi Māori e tanga, which is what we call it, peace, and the way of the white feather, which is to do things without violence. But I know that people across New Zealand who are talking to me are saying they're not going to stand for it, and that makes me really concerned. They're saying that they will be violent and violently resist. I'm doing what I can to keep people calm. This is the other thing the government doesn't realise that I do. I actually moderate and speak to people and hopefully calm them down, so they don't go out there and do things of a violent nature. And that's really, really important to me. But as you say, us fathers, we take our babies and our children's protection and health very, very seriously. And I'm deeply concerned about how I would react if that threat was on my doorstep. So I'm not immune to thinking that if I had to defend my family, which I would in a heartbeat, would I go violent? Well, we'll see on the day. But
well, just to clarify this issue as well, if somebody attacks you and you haven't attacked them, that's violence. It comes from the Latin volare, which means to violate. But if somebody attacks you and you defend yourself, that is the defensive use of force. That is not violence.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, that's the strict terminology behind it. But we all know what, in practicality, we're talking about force, physical force, resistance, and that's where people can get hurt. And I've met people that have said that if anyone tries to go on their land, they're going to get a bullet heading their way, and that's got me concerned. And as you know, that's part of the leftist social agenda. They want to cause a civil war. They want to cause civil resistance. And just on that note, mate, I've got a training video from the Defence Force where they are training in an exercise called Operation Katipo. Operation Katipo,
yes.
Katipo. You know about that?
I'm familiar with this operation, yep.
Right, okay. So people need to get online and have it on YouTube and look at that Operation Katipo. And, I'm looking all through it, and it looked like a civil defence type thing until they said, and I quote, how they put it, actually, let's get it right, basically saying that the soldiers were training to defeat armed militia resistance in New Zealand using New Zealand troops and international troops. They say it's stated, it's clear in this 15-minute training video that I've got a copy of. They are saying that one of the purposes for this is so that they can respond to armed militia in New Zealand and resistance to the government. Can you believe that?
Yeah. Well, and this is the thing about the New World Order. It's a very, very long plan, and they don't do things by halves. They do the full due diligence on this. And in fact, the war games that were being conducted during Operation Katipo were with anti-US protesters on beaches holding signs and things of that nature. And the pretext for this operation, which amounted to the largest foreign troop movements in New Zealand soil since World War II, was to take out a democratically elected New Zealand dictator. Okay, as in they have trained to take you out already, Billy. Have we trained to defend ourselves against such attack? I don't think we have yet. But with the wisdom of the crowd, this is another interesting thing that you need to think about, is that right here, there's your ideas, Billy, here's my ideas, Billy, but what if the entire crowd gave us all their ideas and we had a look at this and went, hey, whoa, that's an interesting idea I didn't think of. Here's a peaceful method of doing it. Here's a great propaganda technique. That kind of thing. And as you were saying, it's about being creative at the moment. We can expose these operations. We can expose their implications. However, when it comes to, like, for example, if we were to call for violence or for kidnapping the Prime Minister or something of that nature, immediately there would be real consequences upon us. So are we just being careful here when we're saying what we're saying, or are we 100% behind peaceful solutions here?
Oh, I think we're both 100% behind peaceful solutions here. I just want to acknowledge Josh, who just asked the question. Yeah, Josh, you're quite correct. There's a 2015 and 2017 Operation Katipo training film, if you like, on YouTube. The 2017 one is the one that I've studied, and that says that they were training to put down armed resistance through armed militia in New Zealand. So have a look at the 2017 version. But just look at the way Mahatma Gandhi was able to get Indian independence, where he led the entire nation into peaceful resistance, and that is going to be a good one. But what I do want to say to New Zealand military members, to New Zealand police members, like my good friends that I've got in there, guys, you know that you are legally obliged to respectfully decline carrying out orders that you view are immoral and that are illegal, and you are under no threat of prosecution if you do that on those grounds. You do not need to violate New Zealand citizens' rights and freedoms. You do not need to work with foreign international troops in restricting their rights and freedoms in New Zealand, and you can disobey those orders if you feel they are illegal and immoral, and you've got a moral obligation to decline any such orders that you think conflict with those. It's the very first thing they teach you in basic training in the army, is that they teach you that if you believe you've been given an order that's immoral or illegal, that you are to resist it and disobey it and stand your ground.
That would be good if we had enough people to lay down their arms and not enforce these measures. My concern is kind of like I'm into sci-fi to a large degree, and all of these sci-fi dystopias, there is a reason why people oppress other people, because if they don't, they're out of house and home themselves, and they too will be on the breadlines. And with the destruction, in my opinion, deliberate destruction of the economy, there may be people who are far more desperate to feed their families, and that they will be willing to oppress their fellow New Zealanders in lieu of becoming oppressed themselves.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why looking after each other is going to be the best strategy. We really do. We need to, rather than being in a position where you feel you have to go and steal someone's food. Actually, let's take the other approach and work together to feed each other, and that's one of the strategies that we have in our economic reboot, where we want to work with landowners that have miles of unused land, and using it and growing food so that we can sell it and that we can also feed communities and the whānau that own the land, get a business out of it, and they get food out of it. And that's going to be part of the along with good business and trading initiatives and policies. That's going to be what's going to help save our country, so that we continuously do not go into debt. International spending receipts to what we buy offshore. We need to lower those down and increase the amount of money coming into our country through what we sell. And that's when you get that new money. That's when you can get real growth and sustainability and stability again in the economy. Vinny, I'm no economist, but I'm a meat and potatoes guy, and it just seems logic that in terms of looking after our country, we work backwards the other way. We start with our whānau, we start with our community, we start with our region, and we start with our country, and make sure that we're all taken care of. And that way, these buggers can't crash our economy and cause us to implode.
People are a bit scared out there, and they maybe understandably so. And you mentioned Gandhi before about how he peacefully led a revolution in India, and just wanted to illustrate one example of that, ladies and gentlemen. You had a line of British soldiers with clubs, and then you had a line of Indian men who were unarmed, and behind the line of Indian men were a bunch of Indian women, and then they were stacked in rows like that. The men's job was to get beaten. They just went up and allowed themselves to be beaten by these police. Then the women would drag them back, take care of them, and another line of men would allow themselves to be beaten. Eventually, every single club was smashed to splinters, and you couldn't beat a single Indian even if you tried to. That's how they won their independence, by taking one for the team. Okay? Think about the real sacrifice that is going to be asked of you, ladies and gentlemen, and ask yourself, are you the kind of person who would allow yourself to experience real pain and real injuries so that your country might be free? Not with violence, but just taking the hit. That's something we all got to search ourselves for. Now, I had a comment from Billy Glenn T in the chat room. Vinny, can you please advise how overseas Kiwis can vote for Advanced New Zealand and NZPP? You've got to go to elections.org.nz and register to vote, and within there, but also the elections website is ridiculously difficult to navigate, in my opinion, in terms of usability and function and what have you. It's just it's not good. So it's going to be a hard slog, ladies and gentlemen. But elections.org.nz should be the place where you can get the information and be able to vote for New Zealand. Which brings us the important point: New Zealanders who want to come home, Billy. There's been so many things that have happened in this country over the years that have forced our people to leave these shores. We want them to come back, don't we?
Yeah, we do want them to come back, and I'm getting messages every day from people overseas that want to come home. They're desperately concerned with what's going on here. They want to come here, and but the thing is, now there's an extra punitive measure that the government's put in place now for people coming home, and that is a $3,000 per person cost through going through the detention process at the border. So if you've got a family of 6 of you or 5 of you that are coming back from overseas and want to come back to New Zealand, you're going to have to go through the 2-week detention/quarantine process, and that's $3,000 a head. It's $15,000 to people that they have to furnish, and not everyone can afford that. I mean, I wouldn't be able to afford that right now if I had to suddenly come up with $15,000 to get my whānau back home to New Zealand, where I was born and raised. So that's the absurdity of all this. It's just out of control, mate. It really is.
Now, the police, the military, and the financiers, these are the three things that every single successful regime in the entirety of human history has had on their side in order to acquire and maintain their hold on power. So if, ladies and gentlemen, you know people in the police, you know people in the military, you know people who have extraordinary high finances, tell them about Advance New Zealand. Tell them about the New Zealand Public Party. Get them on side. The reason why it's the police, the military, and the financiers is because power gives order. The police keep the order in the streets, the military keep the order if that breaks down, and the financiers pay both of them to make sure that they don't just give up their jobs and go home. All right? We need these people on side, so let's stop with the anti-police rhetoric, let's stop with the anti-military rhetoric, and start talking to the people themselves, because we are going to need them on our side.
Oh, excellent. Just a couple of interesting things from, I'm seeing the messages up here. Donald Trump mentioned something happening in New Zealand at his rally in Manitoka today. I'll have to have a look at that. And Bronny, yes, that was my little girl. She's 5 years old. And, and this is why I'm doing this. It's for our babies, it's for the kids out there, the ones that are alive now, the ones that are about to be born and be born in the future. That's why this movement is so important. It's, like your Bubba there, it's just, this is why we're doing this. It's for freedoms, it's for rights to protect ourselves. It is about asking this government to make sure its testing equipment is 100% accurate, not 96, not 80%, not 30% accurate, but 100%. It's about asking this government to be honest and respond to this disease and crisis using facts-based information about the deadliness of this disease, which has now been proven to be the equivalent of a flu virus. It's about asking this government to stop the destruction of our economy. Why? Because these babies, like your sweet little girl there, Vinny, are going to be the ones that are paying this off, and we just can't stand for that. Vinny, I've got a roll, mate. I've got my next. We've gone for an hour and 10 minutes today, so it's been great. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all those technical difficulties in the beginning for delaying us. All right, Billy Te Kahika, ladies and gentlemen, nzpp.org.nz is his website. Also go to advancenewzealand.org. And if you are watching this on the live YouTube chat, ladies and gentlemen, please subscribe. Please like the video. And please, for goodness sake, share it. Share it absolutely everywhere. This is the people's public movement, ladies and gentlemen. You are making this happen. This video will go nowhere unless you make it happen. Thank you so much, Billy, for your time. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to the Vinny Eastwood Show. I am not a credible journalist. I'm an incredible journalist. And you can donate in the links and descriptions below. Thank you very much for your time.